Right now, Africa is being torn apart. Literally. The continent, home to 1.5 billion people, is cracking open, the ground is pulling apart, and smoke is rising from deep fractures. In September 2005, something unbelievable happened in the Afar Desert, on the border between Ethiopia and Eritrea. Over 100 earthquakes struck in just 1 week. The ground split open for dozens of kilometers in length and up to 8 meters wide. Smoke rose from the cracks, and in some places the temperature reached nearly 100 degrees Celsius. It was magma pushing its way to the surface. Then the Dabahu volcano erupted, sending lava straight from the depths of the planet. Local people said the ground shook under their feet for weeks. Livestock refused to drink water from wells because it became hot and smelled like sulfur. People fled, leaving behind homes and animals. Roads collapsed into the earth, and entire sections of land sank below sea level. In the village of Gabo, the entire center of town disappeared underground in a single night. Geologists quickly realized this wasn't normal tectonic activity. It was the beginning of a full-scale continental split. Satellite images showed that the crack was growing at record speed, much faster than any similar process happening elsewhere on Earth. It turned out that Africa is breaking into two pieces. The Somali plate is moving east, and the Nubian plate is shifting west. Between them, magma is rising from inside the planet, creating massive pressure that is tearing the continent apart. Huge cracks have already formed, as deep as a multi-story building and as wide as a multi-lane highway. In a few million years, there will be a new ocean here, connected to the Red Sea. But the disaster has already begun. Since 2005, dozens of new major cracks have been recorded across the region. In the city of Arta in Djibouti, a fracture split the main road in two, dividing the town. In Kenya, part of a major highway collapsed so deep that the bottom couldn't be seen, creating a massive chasm as wide as a football field. Across the region, houses are cracking from the foundation to the roof. The railway line between Addis Ababa and Djibouti is frequently damaged by shifting ground. Millions of people now live on the edge of a giant crack that grows larger every year. Around Lake Assal, the water level has dropped several meters in recent years because the lake bed is sinking along with the tectonic plate. We are witnessing something that usually takes millions of years, the birth of a new ocean in real time. Geologists have found that the rate of plate separation here is hundreds of times faster than the average in other rift zones around the world. This isn't some distant geological process in the middle of a desert. These cracks run under cities, rip through roads, and destroy homes. People wake up in shock to find their streets split by a giant gap. Entire neighborhoods are becoming unlivable. Millions of people in the region are already thinking about moving, and in the coming years, mass migration will become unavoidable. But while a new ocean in Africa will take millions of years to appear, the existing oceans are expanding right now. And the consequences of this we will see in our lifetime. All over the world, the water is slowly but steadily rising. Every minute, Greenland and Antarctica lose millions of tons of ice. In the last 20 years, the rate of melting has doubled, and in some areas, tripled. The Thwaites Glacier in Antarctica, which is the size of an entire US state, loses tens of billions of tons of ice every year, and the melting is speeding up with each passing year. Since the end of the 19th century, global sea levels have already risen by nearly 1/4 of a meter. And half of that rise happened just in the past 25 years. The process is accelerating. What used to be almost invisible can now be seen with the naked eye. In Miami, even on sunny days, streets flood with water. The rising ocean forces underground water to the surface. The city spends hundreds of millions of dollars each year on pumping systems and drainage upgrades. In Jakarta, entire districts are sinking underwater faster than sea levels are rising. This megacity is doomed. By 2050, it will be completely submerged. Venice now faces flooding more than half the days each year. A massive system of mobile sea barriers, which took 20 years to build and cost billions of euros, is now being used almost daily. In Norfolk, the largest US Navy base in the world is flooded 10 times a year during regular high tides. Just a few decades ago, this only happened in disaster movies. Now it's everyday reality for coastal cities. By the middle of the century, more than 800 million people across hundreds of cities will be at risk of flooding. If the sea rises by just 1 meter, parts of New York will vanish. All of Lower Manhattan will be underwater. London will lose entire neighborhoods along the Thames, including its financial district. Shanghai will lose its airport and half of its downtown. Mumbai will lose its historic center and banking quarter. If the water rises by 2 meters, the Nile Delta, home to tens of millions of Egyptians, will be completely flooded. That's a third of Egypt's population. Bangladesh, home to hundreds of millions, will lose a large part of its land and farmland. In Vietnam, the Mekong Delta, which feeds millions and produces half of the country's rice, will sink beneath the sea. Island nations like Tuvalu, Kiribati, and the Maldives are already preparing for total evacuation. Tuvalu is buying land in New Zealand to relocate all its citizens. Kiribati has bought territory in Fiji. The Maldives, where most land is less than 1 meter above sea level, is building floating cities and artificial islands, but eventually all of it will be swallowed by the sea. Entire countries will disappear. This is not science fiction. NASA is tracking sea level rise from space, and the grim numbers are rising faster than anyone predicted. Scientists are constantly updating their estimates, and each time, the outlook gets worse. By the end of the century, sea levels may rise not by half a meter, but by several times more. But even rising water is a relatively slow threat. There are forces that could change our entire world in a single day, not from space, but from deep under the ground. Beneath the beautiful valleys of Yellowstone National Park lies the most powerful bomb on Earth, a supervolcano with a magma chamber larger than a big city. The amount of magma inside it is so massive that it could cover the entire United States in lava. The last eruption happened more than 500,000 years ago. Back then, ash covered half the continent. Animals that survived walked over ash as if it were snow. For comparison, the famous eruption of Mount Vesuvius looks like a firecracker next to this. Now geologists are recording worrying signs. The ground in the park is literally swelling. This means the magma chamber is expanding and pressure is increasing. The number of earthquakes has grown significantly. The ground is shaking almost all the time. The temperature of geothermal springs is rising, and some geysers have changed their patterns. The famous Old Faithful now erupts later than usual. In recent years, earthquake swarms have been recorded. Thousands of tremors over just a few weeks. Temperatures in some springs have reached record highs. The U.S. Geological Survey has installed more than 150 seismographs and constantly monitors even the smallest changes. If Yellowstone erupts, the effects will be catastrophic for the entire planet. Everything alive within 100 kilometers will die instantly from toxic gases and molten lava. Cities like Salt Lake City, Denver, and Bozeman would be wiped off the map. Ash up to 3 meters thick would cover land from California to New York, and even the East Coast would see a heavy layer. All agriculture within 1,000 kilometers would stop completely. The ash would make the soil useless for decades. Most crops in the U.S. would be gone within a week, and livestock farming would collapse due to poison feed. The transport system would break down, airports would shut down, car engines would stop working due to abrasive ash, and train tracks would become blocked. Ash would rise into the stratosphere up to 30 kilometers high and block sunlight. Global temperatures would drop by several degrees for years, in some areas by as much as 10 degrees. A global famine would begin. Crop yields could drop by 90% even in countries not directly hit by the ash. The world would lose its biggest food supplier. The U.S. exports almost half the world's grain, a third of its soy, and a quarter of its beef. Food prices would skyrocket, and billions of people would face starvation. The economic losses would reach tens of trillions of dollars, and global trade would stop for months. Historical data shows that eruptions like this happen every few 100,000 years. Scientists can't predict exactly when the next one will happen. It might be in 1,000 years, or it might be tomorrow. The chance of an eruption in any single year is not very high, but it never goes away. But there is an even more dangerous threat on Earth, one that makes no sound, no smoke, and simply melts, releasing things that were locked underground for thousands of years. In Siberia, Alaska, and northern Canada, the permafrost has started to melt. a layer of frozen ground that formed over tens of thousands of years. Beneath it lie trillions of tons of methane and carbon dioxide, trapped over millennia. According to scientists, the amount of carbon in the permafrost is twice as much as what exists in the entire atmosphere. Temperatures in the Arctic are rising twice as fast as the global average, by 3 degrees over the last 50 years, compared to 1 degree worldwide. As a result, the permafrost is melting up to 3 meters deep, uncovering organic matter that starts to decompose and release dangerous gases. Giant craters have recently started appearing in the Siberian tundra, caused by underground methane explosions. The first was found on the Yamal Peninsula, a huge hole big enough to fit a house. Since then, several more craters of similar size have been discovered. The explosions happen when methane builds up under the permafrost. Pressure rises until it bursts through the surface. In lakes across northern Canada and Alaska, the water is bubbling from escaping gases, and fish are dying in large numbers due to low oxygen levels. Scientists have recorded places where methane concentration is thousands of times higher than normal. In Alaska, some villages are sinking. In one town, almost every house has been damaged by thawing ground. Methane warms the planet much more than carbon dioxide, especially in the first years after it enters the air. Today, melting permafrost is releasing millions of tons of methane each year, about as much as all the world's rice fields produce, and the amount grows every year. The more the permafrost melts, the more methane is released. The more methane is released, the higher the temperature gets. The higher the temperature, the faster the permafrost melts. This is a loop with no breaks. Scientists call it the point of no return. Computer models show that if global warming reaches 1.5 degrees, widespread thawing will begin, and if it reaches 2 degrees, the process will become unstoppable. If this process fully takes off, global warming will keep going on its own. Even if humans stop all emissions completely, the extra gases from melting permafrost could raise global temperatures by several more degrees. A hothouse Earth scenario could unfold in the coming decades, where temperatures rise by almost 10 degrees Celsius in a short time, making most of the planet uninhabitable. With this level of warming, food production could be cut in half, deserts could expand several times over, glaciers would completely disappear, and sea levels could rise by tens of meters. 2/3 of Earth's population would be living in areas where surviving without air conditioning is impossible. This process has already begun. We are close to the point of no return. In recent decades, the area covered by permafrost has shrunk by millions of square kilometers, more than the size of the world's largest countries. Permafrost is no longer permanent. But when our planet warms, its main climate engine begins to break down. And if it stops, the climate won't change over centuries, but over years. In the Atlantic Ocean, an invisible engine is at work that warms Europe and stabilizes the planet's climate. It's a system of currents scientists call AMOC, the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation. Its most famous part is the Gulf Stream. It moves millions of cubic meters of water every second, many times more than all the rivers in the world combined. Warm water flows north toward Europe, releasing heat equal to 1 million nuclear power plants. Cold water sinks up to 3 kilometers deep and flows back south. This cycle has worked for millions of years and makes Europe several degrees warmer than it should be at that latitude. But now it's weakening. In recent decades, the flow has slowed significantly, the biggest change in over 1,000 years. In recent years, the Gulf Stream has been the weakest ever recorded, with its speed dropping to historic lows. The reason is the melting glaciers of Greenland, which add hundreds of billions of tons of fresh water into the ocean every year. Fresh water is lighter than salty water. It doesn't sink and disrupts the circulation. Rainfall in the North Atlantic has also increased, further diluting ocean's salinity. Recent studies are alarming. The system is on the verge of collapse. According to scientists, AMOC could shut down sometime between 2025 and 2095, with the most likely time frame around the middle of this century. Nearly all models predict a complete shutdown before the year 2100. If AMOC stops, the global consequences will unfold within just 10-20 years. Europe will cool by 5 to 10 degrees Celsius, and in some areas by as much as 15 degrees Celsius. London will have a climate like northern Canada. Winters will drop to -15 degrees Celsius. Scandinavia will become uninhabitable. Farming in the UK, France, and Germany will become nearly impossible. Rainfall in Europe will be cut in half, causing droughts. The monsoons in India and West Africa will vanish. 1 billion people will lose their main source of agricultural water. In India, rice yields will drop nearly 50%. In West Africa, grain production will fall by 2/3. Sea levels on the U.S. East Coast will rise even more than the global average due to circulation changes. Atlantic hurricanes will become stronger and more frequent. Without the Gulf Stream's cooling effect, ocean temperatures will rise and storms will gain more energy. The Amazon rainforest will lose much of its rainfall, dry out, and turn into savanna, releasing tens of billions of tons of carbon into the air, as much as all global industry emits over several years. Sea ice around Antarctica will melt faster due to warmer waters flowing in from the north. Our world is used to slow climate changes, but a Gulf Stream shutdown could completely reshape the planet's climate in just 1 decade. Economic losses would reach hundreds of trillions of dollars, and hundreds of millions of people would become climate refugees. Earth has always been alive. It breathed through volcanoes, moved continents, changed its climate. But those changes happened slowly over millions of years in geological time. In just 100 years, we've given the planet a massive shock. We've pumped mountains of carbon into the sky, heated the air, melted ancient ice, and changed the chemistry of the oceans. Our interference has created a volatile mix. Now Earth is doing what it always did, only hundreds of times faster and more aggressively. Glaciers are disappearing in years instead of millennia. Permafrost is melting and exploding into giant craters. Ocean currents that worked for millions of years are shutting down in decades. Temperatures are rising so fast that ecosystems can't keep up. The climate is no longer changing slowly. It's lurching in violent jumps. We've awakened the planet and forced it into overdrive. And now all we can do is stand and watch in fear as our actions and nature's forces combine into a single destructive wave that can no longer be stopped. It has already begun, and there is no way back.